The words were stones in her throat, heavy and sharp. "I can't," Maya whispered, the sound swallowed by the cavernous silence of his penthouse. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mirroring the storm inside her. "I can't do this, Julian. I can't bring my son into this world." He stood across the marble expanse, a statue carved from shadows and tailored silk. His face, usually a mask of controlled intensity, was fractured with a pain so raw it stole her breath. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched her, his dark eyes holding a universe of disbelief and despair. This was it, the precipice she had been unknowingly walking towards since the day she met him. "This world," she repeated, her voice gaining a sliver of strength fueled by a mother's terror. "Guns, whispers, men who look through you like your glass. Your world will shatter him. It will shatter me." He took a single step forward, a soundless plea. "Maya, don't." His voice, the same one that had coaxed her secrets and soothed her fears, was a weapon now. It targeted the weakest parts of her resolve. But she had to be strong. For Leo, her beautiful, innocent boy who deserved scraped knees from playground falls, not from diving for cover. She clutched the strap of her worn bag, her only shield against the wealth that suffocated her, and the man who had resurrected her heart only to place it in the line of fire. "I'm sorry," she said, the lie bitter on her tongue. She wasn't sorry for leaving. She was sorry it had to be this way. She was sorry she had ever let herself believe a fairy tale could exist in the darkest corners of the city. She turned, and every step toward the door was a betrayal of her own happiness. The click of the lock behind her was the sound of a final, clean break. It was the sound of survival. 3 months earlier, survival had a different sound. It sounded like the tired hum of a fluorescent light above a cracked vinyl booth. It smelled like stale coffee and grease. It felt like the last 3 crumpled dollar bills in her pocket, warm and flimsy against her palm. Maya watched her 6-year-old son, Leo, meticulously color a dinosaur in the paper placemat menu. He was the sun in her perpetually cloudy sky, his brow furrowed in concentration, his small tongue peeking out from the corner of his mouth. His happiness was the only currency that mattered, and right now she was nearly bankrupt. The bill for their shared plate of pancakes and his glass of milk sat on the edge of the table, a stark white reminder of their precarious finances. $7.53. After paying, she would have just enough for the bus ride home. Groceries would have to wait. Again! A familiar, cold dread coiled in her stomach, a sensation she knew better than her own heartbeat. She was afraid not of exhaustion, held together by sheer will and a mother's love. 2 jobs, a full-time nursing student course load, and the endless, beautiful, demanding job of raising a child on her own. Sleep was a luxury she rented in 2-hour increments. A commotion near the register drew her attention. A man was speaking to the waitress in a low, calm voice. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she saw the waitress's sympathetic frown. The man was breathtaking. That was her first, detached thought. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. Tailored so perfectly it seemed woven onto his frame. His hair was black, styled with an effortless precision, and his profile was a sharp, elegant line of jaw and cheekbone. He didn't belong in a place like this, a greasy spoon diner nestled in the city's forgotten corner. He was a creature of marble and steel, dropped into a world of linoleum and formica. He turned slightly, and she saw his face. It was a face that commanded attention, handsome in a way that was almost severe. But it was his eyes that snared her. They were dark, deep-set, and held a profound loneliness that resonated with a painful chord deep inside her. He looked lost. The waitress walked away, shaking her head. The man reached into his pockets, first his suit jacket, then his trousers, a quiet frustration tightening his features. Maya understood instantly. He couldn't pay. The irony was thick enough to taste. A man who looked like he owned the world couldn't afford a $10 meal. From his lonely booth across the diner, Julian Kang felt the familiar weight of his father's words. To understand the world, you must see its heart, and the heart is not in the boardroom. It is in the gutter. See who offers a hand to a man with nothing. That is the person you can trust. It was a test, a stupid, sentimental tradition his father had forced upon him since he was a boy. A way to gauge the city's pulse. He would enter a common place, order a simple meal, and claim to have lost his wallet. Usually, he was met with suspicion, derision, or, at best, a begrudging offer from the owner to wash dishes. It always reinforced his bleak view of humanity, a transactional, self-serving species. He had already dismissed everyone in the diner, the tired waitress who just wanted her shift to end, the two construction workers arguing over sports, the old man nursing a coffee. Then his eyes landed on her. She was sitting with a small boy, her focus entirely on the child. There was a weariness about her, etched into the delicate lines around her eyes, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective light. She wasn't beautiful in the polished, sterile way of the women in his world. Her beauty was something more vital, more real. It was in the determined set of her jaw, the gentle curve of her smile as she praised her son's drawing. It was authentic. He watched as she glanced toward him, her brow knitting in concern. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the quick glance at her own bill, then at the crumpled bills she pulled from her pocket. He saw the internal debate. He expected her to look away, to retreat back into her own problems. It was the logical, sensible thing to do. She clearly had nothing to spare. But she didn't look away. Maya felt a pull, an instinct she couldn't ignore. Her own mother, Eleanor, would have called her a fool. "You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, Maya." But Maya saw the flicker of humiliation in the stranger's eyes, a look she knew intimately, the shame of being unable to provide, even for something as simple as a meal. She slid out of the booth. "Stay here and finish your picture, sweetie," she murmured to Leo, pressing a kiss to his hair. She walked to the register, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. The man was still standing there, a portrait of stoic embarrassment. She didn't look at him directly. She couldn't. Instead, she spoke to the waitress. "I'll get his too," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She pushed her $3 and the coins from her pocket onto the counter, along with the man's bill. The total was nearly $12. She was short. The cold dread turned into a hot flush of shame. I'm a little short," she stammered, her gaze fixed on a crack in the counter. Before the waitress could respond, a deep voice spoke beside her. "That won't be necessary." Julian had moved so silently she hadn't noticed. He was standing beside her now, close enough that she could smell the faint, clean scent of expensive cologne and rain. He placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "But thank you," he said. The words were simple, but his tone was layered with something she couldn't decipher. Awe, disbelief. Time seemed to warp, to slow down and stretch. She finally forced herself to look up at him, and in that moment, the world fell away. His eyes locked onto hers, and it was like a physical impact. The diner, Leo, her exhaustion, it all vanished. There was only the intense, searching darkness of his gaze. It wasn't just a look. It was an excavation. He was seeing past the tired waitress uniform she'd just come from, past the frayed edges of her coat. He was seeing her. For Julian, it was a cataclysm, a tectonic shift in the foundations of his soul. He had looked at thousands of people in his life, sizing them up, judging their worth, their threat level. But looking at her was different. It was like seeing color for the first time. The kindness in her eyes was so pure, so unconditional. It was like a punch to the chest. He saw her struggle, her sacrifice, and in the face of it, she had chosen to help him, a complete stranger. His father's test had always been a cynical exercise, until now. He had found the heart of the city. Maya broke the contact first, unnerved by the intensity of his stare. She felt exposed, her own loneliness reflected back at her in his eyes. "It's fine," she mumbled, grabbing her receipt and turning to flee. "Wait," he said, his voice commanding. "What's your name?" "I have to go," she said, already moving back toward her son. "My son is waiting." She scooped up a bewildered Leo, grabbed their coats, and practically ran out of the diner, the bell above the door chiming a frantic farewell. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The encounter had left her shaken, her nerves raw. She stood at the bus stop, the cold air a welcome shock to her system, Leo's small hand tucked in hers. She had just made a fool of herself, offering her last pennies to a man who could probably buy the entire block. Julian stood at the diner window, watching her go. He watched her wrap her thin coat tighter around herself, shielding the boy from the wind. He saw the bus arrive, and he watched them disappear into it. He felt a sense of loss so profound it was absurd. He had known her for less than 5 minutes. His second in command, Jin, materialized at his side, ever present and silent. "Sir, was the exercise satisfactory?" Julian didn't turn. His eyes remained fixed on the spot where the bus had been. "Find her," he said, his voice low and tight with an unfamiliar emotion. "I want to know everything. Her name, where she lives, what she dreams about when she's not saving strangers." Jin blinked, surprised by the order's personal nature. "Sir, her name?" "I don't know," Julian admitted, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It felt foreign, but I'm going to. The city was a sprawling beast of 8 million souls, but for Julian Kang, it was a closed system. Finding one woman, even without a name, was a matter of resources and will, and he possessed an infinite supply of both. Jin, his most trusted friend and lieutenant since their brutal childhoods, was ruthlessly efficient. Within 48 hours, he had a file. Her name was Maya Williams, 28 years old, a single mother to Leo Williams, age 6. She worked 2 jobs, a part-time orderly at a downtown hospital and a weekend shelf stocker at a bookstore. She was also a full-time nursing student at the community college. Her apartment was a 5th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that the city had all but forgotten. The file contained her credit score, abysmal, her overdue bills, numerous, and a photo of her laughing with her son in a park, her face illuminated with a joy so radiant it made Julian's chest ache. He studied the photograph for a long time. This was the woman who had offered him her last dollars. This resilient, struggling, beautiful woman. His obsession, which had felt like a strange fever dream in the diner, now solidified into a concrete purpose. "Is this legal?" Maya asked, her voice flat. She was standing in the quiet fiction aisle of the bookstore where she worked, a stack of hardcovers in her arms. Julian had appeared out of nowhere, standing there as if he were just another customer, except no other customer wore a suit that whispered of obscene wealth or looked at her like she was the only book worth reading in the entire store. "Finding you," Julian countered, a faint, dry humor in his tone. "That's a matter of perspective." "My perspective is that it's creepy," she shot back, her heart hammering against her ribs. It had been a week since the diner, a week of her replaying that strange, intense moment in her head, a week of telling herself she was an idiot. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said, ignoring her accusation. He gestured to the books in her arms. "Let me help you with those." "I'm fine." She clutched them tighter, a pathetic shield. He didn't press. He simply stood there, an immovable object of quiet intensity. "You left before I could repay you." "You did repay me, with a $100 bill for a cup of coffee. I think we're more than even." Her sarcasm was her armor, honed to a sharp edge by years of deflecting unwanted advances and pitying looks. "I'm not talking about money," he said, and his voice softened, losing its formal edge. "Your kindness. It was unexpected." The sincerity in his eyes disarmed her. She felt her defenses flicker. "Look, I was just trying to be a decent human being. It's not a big deal." "It is," he said, his gaze unwavering. "It is to me." The air between them crackled. Maya felt a blush creep up her neck. She was used to being invisible, a ghost moving through the city, working and studying and mothering in a relentless cycle. No one saw her, not like this. He wasn't looking at her with pity or lust. He was looking at her with a focused, reverent curiosity, as if she were a rare and complex work of art. "I have to get back to work," she said, her voice breathy. She turned and all but fled to the stockroom, his eyes burning into her back. He did not give up. The next day, an anonymous payment cleared her overdue electricity bill. The day after that, 3 bags of high-quality groceries, including Leo's favorite organic apple juice, were delivered to her apartment door from a gourmet market she couldn't even afford to walk past. There was no note. She knew it was him. It was both terrifying and infuriating. This was a violation, a display of power that made her feel small, like a project he had taken on. She found his company name through a quick, panicked search. Kang Enterprises, a global logistics and investment firm with a headquarters that scraped the clouds. She marched into the opulent lobby during her lunch break, her nursing scrubs a stark contrast to the marble and chrome. The receptionist looked at her with thinly veiled disdain until she said Julian Kang's name. The woman's demeanor changed instantly. Maya was whisked up to the top floor in a silent high-speed elevator that made her ears pop. His office was larger than her entire apartment. One wall was a solid pane of glass, offering a god's-eye view of the city. He was standing in front of it, his back to her. "Stop it!" she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. He turned slowly. "Stop what?" "The groceries, the bills. Stop it. I don't want your charity." "It isn't charity," he said, walking toward her. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining a respectful distance. "It's an apology." "An apology for what? For being rich?" she scoffed. "For making you feel small. That was not my intention. My intention was to help. I don't need your help." The words burst out of her, raw and painful. "I've been taking care of myself and my son for 6 years. We do just fine." "I know," he said softly. "I know you do. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Maya." He knew her name. Of course, he knew her name. He probably knew her social security number and what she'd eaten for breakfast. The thought made her skin crawl. And yet, the way he said her name, like it was something precious, sent a traitorous shiver down her spine. "Who are you?" she asked, the question she'd been afraid to voice. "My name is Julian Kang. I'm a businessman." "What kind of businessman finds strange women in diners and pays their bills?" A flicker of something dark and unreadable passed through his eyes. "The kind who recognizes something rare and doesn't want to let it go." He took a breath. "Have dinner with me. One dinner. No more groceries, no more mysterious payments. Just conversation. If you still want me to leave you alone after that, I will." It was a promise, and she could tell he was a man who kept his promises. Her mind screamed at her to say no, to run from this man and the unsettling power that clung to him like a second skin. But her heart, a foolish, starved thing, whispered a different word. "Fine," she heard herself say. One dinner. One dinner became 2, then 3. He introduced her to a world she'd only ever seen in movies. Rooftop restaurants with twinkling cityscapes, private art gallery viewings, quiet walks along the lamplit riverfront. He never flaunted his wealth. It was simply the fabric of his existence. But Maya found that the opulence wasn't what drew her in. It was him. It was the way he listened, truly listened, when she talked about her dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. It was the way his stern face would soften into a genuine smile when she made a sarcastic joke. Most of all, it was the way he was with Leo. He'd met her son cautiously, on neutral ground at a park. Maya had watched with her heart in her throat as Julian, the formidable CEO, knelt on the ground to examine Leo's collection of rocks, discussing the merits of a particularly sparkly piece of granite with the gravity of a corporate negotiation. He didn't talk down to Leo. He talked to him. He pushed him on the swings, his long, expensive coat trailing in the dust, a look of quiet contentment on his face that Maya had never seen before. Leo, who was usually shy around strangers, adored him. "Julian is strong," he'd declared one night. "He can lift me all the way to the sky." Maya was falling, hard. She was falling for the gentle, lonely man hidden inside the powerful tycoon. But the shadows were always there, clinging to the edges of their perfect moments. There were the hushed, urgent phone calls he would take in Korean, his voice turning hard and cold. There was the ever-present Jin, who was more than a driver or an assistant. He was a silent, watchful guardian. And there was the scar, a thin, white line that cut across the knuckles of his right hand. When she asked him about it, he'd simply closed his hand into a fist. "An old mistake," was all he'd said, his eyes distant and clouded. Her best friend, Sarah, was a sounding board for her anxieties. "I don't know, Maya," Sarah said over coffee one afternoon. "It sounds like a movie, and in the movies, the handsome, mysterious billionaire is always hiding something big, like he's a spy, or a vampire, or in the mob." Maya laughed, but the joke landed too close to home. The word mob snagged in her mind. It was absurd, melodramatic, but the feeling of danger, of a darkness she couldn't see but could feel, was undeniable. Julian was aware of her unease. He saw the flicker of fear in her eyes when his phone buzzed with a blocked number, the way she tensed when a black car lingered too long on her street. He hated it. He hated that he was the source of her fear. His life was a meticulously constructed fortress, with his business dealings as the public-facing walls and the syndicate, the true source of his family's power, hidden deep within. He had spent his entire life keeping those two worlds separate. But Maya wasn't a part of either world. She was her own world, one he desperately wanted to enter. But he knew that meant letting her see the darkness he ruled. He was torn between the need to protect her from his truth and the desperate, aching need to be fully known by her. Love, he was discovering, was a terrifying vulnerability. It was a crack in the fortress wall. The crack shattered on a Tuesday night. He had taken her and Leo to a small private carnival he'd arranged to be opened just for them. It was a perfect evening. Leo's face was sticky with cotton candy, and his laughter echoed in the empty park as Julian won him a giant stuffed bear. Maya watched them, a feeling of pure, unadulterated happiness swelling in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She felt like part of a family. As they were leaving, walking toward Jin and the waiting car, two other black sedans screeched to a halt, blocking their path. Men in dark suits emerged, their movements sharp and predatory. Instinct took over Julian. In a fluid motion, he pushed Maya and Leo behind him, his body becoming a shield. His entire demeanor shifted. The gentle, smiling man was gone. In his place was the Kang leader, cold, lethal, and utterly terrifying. "Vasily," Julian said, his voice a low growl. "You are a long way from home." A large, brutish man with a scarred face stepped forward, a cruel smirk on his lips. "I came to deliver a message from my father. He is displeased with the new shipping arrangements." His eyes flickered past Julian to Maya and Leo, a greedy, menacing light in them. "You have found yourself new business? A family?" "They are not your concern," Julian bit out, his hand subtly moving inside his jacket. "Everything you care about is my concern," Vasily sneered. Maya's blood ran cold. She pulled Leo tighter against her, shielding his eyes, her body trembling uncontrollably. This was it. The darkness she had sensed was here, in the flesh, and it was looking right at her son. The standoff was broken by the squeal of more tires. Two more cars, Kang's men, boxed in Vasily's vehicles. Jin was suddenly beside Julian, a gun appearing in his hand as if by magic. The tension was so thick it was hard to breathe. Vasily held up his hands in a mock surrender. "Just a message, Kang, for now." He gave Maya one last lingering look before getting back into his car. The vehicle sped off into the night, leaving an echoing silence. Julian didn't relax. He stood rigid for a long moment before turning around. The cold mask was gone. replaced by a look of sheer horror. His eyes found Maya's, and what he saw in them, the pure, unadulterated terror, broke him. He had failed. He had brought the violence to her doorstep. He had put her and her child in danger. "Get in the car," he commanded Jin, his voice strained. The ride back to her apartment was silent. Leo had fallen asleep, blissfully unaware. Maya couldn't look at Julian. She stared out the window, the city lights a blur through her unshed tears. The fairy tale had ended. The monster was real. He followed her up the 5 flights of stairs. After she put Leo to bed, she found him standing in the middle of her small living room, looking utterly lost. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said, her voice hollow. "All of it." And so he did. He sat on her worn-out sofa, a place he had laughed and read stories to her son, and he confessed his world to her. He told her about his father, the formidable Chairman Kang, who had built a criminal empire from the ground up in the back alleys of Seoul and the docks of this city. He told her about the syndicate, the PI, a brotherhood bound by blood and violence. He explained that Kang Enterprises was the legitimate face, the place where they laundered their power into influence, but the heart of it was dark and rotten. "I inherited it," he said, his voice laced with a lifetime of resignation. "When my father stepped back, it fell to me. It's not a choice, it's a birthright. A cage." He told her about the violence, the rivals like Vasili's family, the constant threat that was the price of their power. He told her the scar on his hand was from his initiation, a blood oath he'd taken when he was just a boy. Maya listened, and with every word, the man she had fallen in love with was replaced by a stranger, a kingpin, a gangster. The beautiful moments they had shared were now tainted, cast in the shadow of this terrible truth. The safety she had felt with him was an illusion. He wasn't a shield, he was a target, and by standing next to him, so was she. So was Leo. That single horrifying thought eclipsed everything else. Her love for him, her own happiness. It was all meaningless in the face of her son's safety. When he finished, silence descended upon the room, heavy and suffocating. He looked at her, his eyes pleading, searching for a forgiveness he didn't deserve. "I love you, Maya," he whispered, the words raw with desperation. "I will keep you safe, I swear it." But she was already gone. He had seen the light in her eyes die, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a mother protecting her child. She stood up, pulling her frayed cardigan around her like armor. "I can't," she whispered, the words stones in her throat. "I can't do this, Julian. I can't bring my son into this world." And so she walked away, leaving him alone in the ruins of the life they had almost built. She walked away from the love of her life to save her son's. The click of the door closing behind her was the most painful sound he had ever heard. It was the sound of his heart breaking. The first month was a blur of motion and denial. Maya packed their few belongings into cardboard boxes, sold what little furniture she had, and took a bus to her mother's house in a sleepy suburban town 3 states away. She enrolled Leo in a new school and found a job at a local clinic, the first step toward finishing her nursing degree. She created a new life, a safe life, a quiet life. It was a living hell. Everywhere she looked, there was an absence shaped like him. She saw his ghost in every well-dressed man on the street. She heard his voice in the low rumble of a passing car. At night, she lay awake in her childhood bed, the floral wallpaper mocking her with its cheerful innocence. She would press a hand to her chest, trying to soothe the relentless physical ache of his absence. Her mother, Eleanor, tried to be supportive in her own critical way. "You did the right thing, baby," she'd say, her hands busy kneading dough in the kitchen. "A mother's first job is to protect her child. That man, he was from another world, a dangerous world." "I know, Mama," Maya would reply, her voice hollow. I know. The words became her mantra, a shield against the tidal wave of regret that threatened to drown her. She knew she had made the only choice she could, but the rightness of the decision didn't make the pain any less excruciating. Leo was the reason she got out of bed each morning. He was resilient, adapting to his new school and making new friends. But even he felt the loss. "When is Julian coming to visit?" he asked one evening, his small face clouded with confusion. "He promised he'd teach me to fly a kite." The innocent question was a knife in Maya's heart. "Julian is very busy with his work, sweetie," she'd choked out, her throat tight. "He lives very far away now." She was a ghost haunting her own life, performing the motions of living, working, studying, parenting, but feeling nothing but a profound, soul-deep emptiness. She had chosen safety over love, and she was beginning to wonder if a life without one was worth the other. For Julian, life without Maya was not life at all. It was a return to the cold, gray existence he had known before her, but 1,000 times worse, because now he knew what he was missing. He knew the warmth of the sun and was now trapped in a permanent eclipse. He threw himself into the syndicate's business with a terrifying ferocity. He was ruthless, efficient, and cold. He crushed Vasili's operation, not out of strategy, but out of a cold, burning rage. He expanded his territory, consolidated his power, and became more feared than his father ever was. His men looked at him with a new kind of awe, a new kind of fear. The broken heart of their leader had made him invincible, but in the silent, lonely hours of the night, in the penthouse that echoed with her absence, he would crumble. He would stand before the glass wall, looking out at the city she was no longer in, and the pain would be a physical thing, a crushing weight on his chest. Jin watched his friend, his boss, his brother, wither from the inside out. "You could find her," Jin said one night, breaking the heavy silence in the office. "You could bring her back." "To what?" Julian shot back, his voice like broken glass. "To a life of looking over her shoulder? To have her son grow up with men like us? She chose to leave that life. I will not drag her back into it." "Then change the life," Jin said simply. The words hung in the air, audacious and impossible. Change the life. Dismantle an empire built on generations of blood and fear. Walk away from the Kang legacy. It was unthinkable. It was suicide. His father would disown him. His rivals would see it as weakness and tear him apart. "It cannot be done," Julian said, the words tasting like ash. "Before you met her," Jin pressed, his loyalty giving him the courage to speak so freely, "you would have said it was impossible for you to love someone. You were wrong." Jin left him alone with the thought. It was a seed planted in the barren ground of his despair. Change the life. For days, the idea circled him, a dangerous, seductive whisper. Could he? Could he actually untangle himself from the web that had defined his entire existence? He thought of Maya's laugh. He thought of the way Leo's small hand had fit perfectly in his. He thought of the life he had glimpsed, a life of simple, profound joy. A life of scraped knees and kites, not bullets and blood oaths. That was the life he wanted, the life he would fight for. The decision, once made, settled in him with the force of a revelation. He knew what he had to do. It would be the hardest, most dangerous war he had ever waged. The process of extraction was brutal. It began with a visit to his father. Chairman Kang, now retired to a sprawling estate, was a man of iron will and ancient traditions. He listened to Julian's plan in stony silence, his face an unreadable mask. "You would throw away everything?" the old man finally asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Our name? Our legacy? For a woman?" "I would build a new legacy," Julian countered. "A legitimate one. One that doesn't require my son to take a blood oath." The mention of a hypothetical son, of a future, seemed to strike a chord in the chairman, but his face hardened again. "The organization will not allow it. Our enemies will not allow it. They will see you as a traitor. They will hunt you down. They will hunt her down." "Let them try," Julian said, his voice cold steel. The war was fought not on the streets, but in boardrooms and back alleys. Julian began the painstaking process of legitimizing his assets. He sold off the illicit parts of the syndicate, the smuggling routes, the gambling dens, the protection rackets, to rivals, a move that was seen as both a sign of weakness and a brilliant strategic consolidation. He used the massive influx of cash to aggressively expand Kang Enterprises, pouring money into tech startups, real estate development, and green energy. He was laundering his family's entire history. He promoted Jin to CEO of the new clean corporation, trusting him implicitly. He cut ties with old, dangerous allies and made new ones in the legitimate world. Every move was a risk. There were attempts on his life, betrayals from within his own ranks by men loyal to the old ways. He moved through the danger with a singular, unwavering focus. The image of Maya's face was his shield and his sword. It took a full year. A year of threats, of violence, of walking a razor's edge between his old world and the new one he was trying to build. He poured millions into charities, building community centers in the same neighborhoods his family had once exploited. He was not just erasing his past, he was atoning for it. Finally, it was done. The Kang Syndicate was a ghost, a legend whispered in the underworld. Julian Kang was now just a ridiculously wealthy, reclusive philanthropist and investor. He had shed his old skin. He had changed his world. Now, he had to see if she would be a part of it. Maya was leaving the clinic after a long shift, her feet aching and her mind numb with exhaustion. It had been 13 months since she'd left the city, 13 months since she'd seen Julian. The ache in her chest had dulled to a constant, low-grade pain, a scar on her soul that would never fully fade. A sleek black car was parked across the street. It was understated, not flashy, but it radiated an aura of quiet expense. Her heart stopped. It couldn't be. She was imagining things, hallucinating from lack of sleep. The passenger door opened and he stepped out. He looked different. The severe, dangerous edge was gone, replaced by a quiet weariness and a deep, soul-shaking hope that was plain to see even from 50 feet away. He wore a simple dark sweater and trousers, no suit, no armor. He was just a man, her man. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, the world narrowing to the space between them. He didn't move toward her. He waited, giving her the choice, giving her all the power. Slowly, as if in a dream, she crossed the street. He watched her approach, his dark eyes drinking her in. She could see the year of battle etched on his face. Julian, she breathed, his name a prayer on her lips. Maya, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's over. It's all gone. What is? She whispered, though she already knew. She could see it in the lightness of his posture, the absence of shadows in his eyes. The syndicate, the danger. I dismantled it. I sold it. I broke it. I buried it. All that's left is the legitimate business. A life. A clean life. He took a hesitant step closer. I did it for you. For Leo. For the chance to build a world that is worthy of you. Tears streamed down her face, hot and cleansing. The grandness of his gesture, the sheer impossibility of what he had done, overwhelmed her. He hadn't just changed his job, he had waged a war against his own history, against his own identity, all for her. The love she had tried so desperately to bury erupted inside her, fierce and undeniable. Is it true? She asked, needing to hear it again. It's true, he said, his voice cracking. I'm just a man, Maya. A man who loves you more than his own life. A man asking for a second chance. She didn't answer with words. She closed the remaining distance between them and launched herself into his arms. He caught her, holding her so tightly she felt her feet leave the ground, his face buried in her hair. It was a collision of longing and relief, of pain and absolution. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her hands framing his face. She saw her future in his eyes, a future of safety and love, a future where she didn't have to choose. And then she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, hungry claiming. It was a year of silent nights and aching hearts poured into one moment. It was the reunion of two halves of the same soul, a promise made and a promise fulfilled. It was the end of their separation and the explosive, beautiful beginning of their forever. 2 years later, the sound of survival was laughter. It was the sound of Leo, now a sturdy 8-year-old, shrieking with delight as Julian chased him through the sprawling backyard of their home. It was the happy bark of the golden retriever, named Rocky after Leo's favorite granite stone, that joined in the chase. Maya watched from the porch, a gentle smile on her face, a nursing textbook resting forgotten in her lap. She had graduated top of her class and now worked in the pediatric wing of the new hospital Julian's foundation had built, a state-of-the-art facility that served the city's most vulnerable families. Their life was beautiful in its simplicity. It was family dinners and bedtime stories. It was PTA meetings and weekend trips to the coast. The shadows of Julian's past were gone, replaced by the brilliant, blinding light of their shared future. Julian caught her eye from across the lawn, his face flushed with exertion and happiness. The lonely, haunted man she had met in a greasy spoon diner was gone. In his place was a husband and a father, a man redeemed not by power or wealth, but by the transformative, unyielding power of love. He jogged over to the porch, scooping her up in a hug and kissing her deeply. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against her lips. "Just how much a cup of coffee can cost," she whispered, her heart full to bursting, "and how sometimes it's worth every penny." This story teaches us about the profound power of love to inspire redemption and change. It shows that a single act of kindness, offered without expectation, can set in motion a chain of events that transforms lives. Maya's selfless gesture woke something in Julian, and his love for her gave him the strength to dismantle a world of darkness to build a new one worthy of her. It's a testament to the idea that no one is beyond saving, and that the bravest act is not to wield power, but to surrender it for the sake of love. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content, and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. It explores themes of sacrifice, redemption, and the courage it takes to choose a better path, even when it seems impossible. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel for more emotional and inspiring content, and share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. Now, we have a question for you. Do you think Maya was right to leave Julian initially, even though she loved him? Was her choice to protect her son the only one she could have made? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And finally, we want to know what you'd like to see next. Help us choose our next story. Should we tell A, the story of Jin, Julian's loyal friend, who finds an unexpected love of his own while navigating his new role as CEO? B, the dramatic backstory of Chairman Kang exploring his ruthless rise to power and the one great love he lost along the way? Vote for A or B in the comments section. We can't wait to read your feedback and bring you another story you'll love. Thank you for watching.